Hello everyone, welcome to Breaking Even with Al Paton on your official AFL Supercoach feed, heading into round 11, the last round before the buys, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But I'm here, Al Paton, of course, your host, with Chloe Williams, regular on the couch. Chloe, welcome back.
Happy to be here. It's been a bit of a rough week so far this week, but hopefully we can solve a few conundrums today.
Well, we have one of the biggest names in Supercoach and footy here to help us. Regular viewers might notice that Patch is out. He did score 2,500 last week, but that's not good enough. He's gone to Spain, I think, but we have a very capable replacement, of course, in the Supercoach ambassador himself and St Kilda legend, Leigh Montagna. Welcome.
Hello, Al, Chloe. Yeah, I think we're all in damage control this week as Supercoach coaches, so we'll have to try and put our thinking hats on.
And very briefly, how's your team looking this year?
I started off okay. At one stage, I think I was inside the top 5,000 early, but I've just been on a slow decline ever since. So I'm hoping to get some help today to try and resurrect my season because it's just been slipping away like Carlton's at the moment.
Bit of a low blow.
Drive by there. Thanks. Reminder, everybody, review, subscribe on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and watch on the Code Sports YouTube feed. And, of course, Supercoach Plus is where you can get your buy planner and all your break-evens and Supercoach stats that we love. $1 offer for Code Sports subscription at the moment, so that includes everything you get on Code Sports and includes Supercoach Plus, so highly recommended. But this is the big thing to talk about this week. Every Supercoach knows managing injuries is the key to success. This is the Injury Report, proudly brought to you by HBF, your health dream team. And there are some massive names on here this week. Tom De Koning will start with. It seems like an eternity ago that we were stressing about him. He missed last week with a larynx injury and is a fitness test this week. We think he probably will play. Jason Horne-Francis, 4 weeks out with a hamstring. For him, he's in 70,000 Supercoach teams. Jack Macrae, a punctured lung, no good at all. 2 to 3 weeks, the Saints are saying. He's in 123,000 Supercoach teams. So, yes, we'll be talking about what to do with him. Finn Callaghan, a shoulder injury, 3 to 4 weeks for him. He's in 42,000 teams. Bailey Smith, there was some nervous tweets going around that he wasn't at main training, but the Cats say he's fine. Dan Batten, our man down there at the Cattery, says don't stress. He'll play on Thursday night. And a couple of quick ones at the Eagles. Jamie Cripps will miss a month with a knee, and Matt Owies will miss a month with a calf injury. So maybe opens the door for some of those cheap Eagles rookies that we might need as backups over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and then also at the Eagles, unfortunate news for Jeremy McGovern with that concussion. He's TBC at the moment. He will consult the league's concussion panel for assessment. So we do wish him well with that one. Sean Darcy at Freo, he's a test as well with his knee. So that really calls into question, is Luke Jackson worth it for that value option? We will talk about that later. Xavier Lindsay, throat injury. He is all good to go.
He was in hospital apparently. I totally missed
hospital. I did miss that one.
That he was struggling to talk after the game, I think, but the Demons say he's all right. So fingers crossed on that one.
Since when did throat injuries become so common? We've had a number of them this year. Max Gawn early in the year. There was another player.
Stephen May.
Stephen May was the other one, as well. So, yeah.
And Tom Lynch, concussion as well. So he entered the concussion protocols a bit later. So for now, just 1 week for that one, but we will keep our eye on that. And then down to the Cattery, I should say, Patrick Dangerfield, his hamstring, they're saying 1 to 2 weeks and 2 to 5 for Jack Bowes. So does that open the door for anyone else at the Cattery? We'll have to see, but there's the buys in there as well. So shouldn't cause too much carnage there.
Quickly, Joey, of all those names, especially some of those big ones, how many in your Supercoach team?
Yeah, it started off on a bad note. So De Koning was obviously, but he should be right to play. So I've got De Koning as a ruck, but I've got Callaghan, Horne-Francis, and Jack Macrae in my side. So I'm banged up, and I've also been in the wars. I've had Tom Stewart sitting there, and Geelong, because with their injury updates, they've been doing my head in. I haven't been sure whether to trade Tom Stewart out, keep him on the bench for 1 week, and I still don't know whether he's going to play. So that's part of the reason for my slow demise.
Hopefully, we might see him back this week. That's a wrap on this week's Injury Report. Thanks to HBF. Make the smart move. Join HBF, your health dream team. Now, this week, obviously, plenty of questions. That's the crux of the show. Thanks for everyone who got in on those, and we'll get to those very shortly. But a couple of quick segments first. We like to look at some break-evens and potential fallen primos, and there are some really high break-evens this week. These are just guys to keep in your thoughts for trading in maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks when we keep an eye on their prices coming down. Zach Butters, huge last week that he got tagged by Oisin Mullen, and he now has a break-even of 206. So, and his price could bottom out when Port come off their bye. Maybe that would be perfect timing for us, so definitely keep an eye on that. Zach Merritt dropped a really poor score last week, so he's got a 200 break-even as well, so he's someone we could maybe consider bringing in. Nick Dacos, if you didn't get him a couple of weeks ago like me and paid up for him, his price is coming right down, $560K now, and he's got a 162 break even. So, yeah, there's a few guys there, and Max Gawn price might start finally coming down if you don't have him, 182 break even this week. And the one that a few people have asked about, I might just ask you quickly, Joey, what you think of Shai Bolton. His price is at $430K, which is actually slightly above where he started the year, but not by much. But the way the prices work, he actually has a -8 break even this week. So this is the week to grab him. And with all those injuries, he could be a straight swap, and you could even make maybe $100,000 by swapping a Jack Macrae to him. How do you see Shai Bolton as a player and a Supercoach option?
Yeah, it's lent that way for me. I think I will put Shai Bolton in for either Macrae or Horne-Francis because we've seen in recent weeks Bolton's going to play a bit more midfield. I think they've really liked at Fremantle what he's been able to do on ball as a centre bounce, sort of more midfielder. So I think we are seeing him get his touches up. He's still always going to get his shots on goal, and if not for some accuracy, he'd score even better than he already does. But I think for me, he'd be one that I'd certainly be considering.
Yep, yeah, I like him as well. And a quick rookie roulette segment, which we sort of normally talk about which rookies to start on field. There's not too many of us, hopefully you have to field too many rookies anymore, but I thought I'd just look at quickly the highest owned rookies that are still in people's teams. So Henry Hustwaite's in 94% of Supercoach teams. This is ranked in the top 10% overall.
Wow.
So I think he had a pretty good game in the VFL last week, although he always seems to put up big numbers in the VFL. Hopefully he can get back into the Hawthorn side. Harry Boyd at the Saints also in over 80% of teams. But the way Rowan Marshall's going.
Yeah, I don't think Big Boyd will be getting a game anytime soon. Harry Hustwaite, did I see something? Is John Newcombe in doubt? Did I?
It wasn't a moon
boot. I did see that floating around.
I heard he was in a moon boot.
Yes, that he came back in a moon boot, but apparently he was training properly yesterday. So, but that would have been good for Supercoach.
Yeah,
it's not so good
on.
for Hawthorn, but
yeah, yep.
Matt Carroll at the Blues obviously came back in last week. He's in 68% of teams. Sardell Hooley up to nearly 60%. So pretty rough. Everyone who brought him in last week, and then he was subbed off at half time. Essendon obviously wasn't travelling too well, but I thought he was unlucky to cop the sub vest, as we call it still. Xavier Lindsay, we mentioned him. He's still in over 50%. Caden Cleary. Tom Gross in around 50%. Still couldn't get a full game last week, but with those injuries at the Eagles, you never know. And a couple of the other names on here. Hugh Boxall is in 35%, and he will be on the bubble still if he breaks back into that St Kilda team. And a couple of people have asked, actually, Joey, you could probably just about jump straight into some questions about, what can Joey tell us about these fringe youngsters at the Saints who seem to come in, get a couple of games, and then go out again. And sort of St Kilda's have been a bit like that themselves this year, up and down.
Yeah.
Where do you see them, and will we see more of them?
Yeah, it's been hard, hasn't it? It's been frustrating. My gut feel is as the season goes on and maybe more and more unlikely that St Kilda play finals, I think they'll certainly give more opportunity to the kids. Probably the ones Toby Trevallier. Like he was good in the last quarter when he came on against West Coast Eagles. And I think with Jack Macrae out, I'm not sure exactly what the balance of the team will look like, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a full game. So he'd be certainly one that I would consider. Yeah, the other guys have been hard. Boxall sort of shown some nice signs and then gone out of the team. I don't know whether he will come back in. He may be just a replacement for Jack Macrae straight in the midfield. But, it's always a bit of a testy one with St Kilda.
And someone asked DV, talking about Jack Macrae, could we potentially hold him? Does a punctured lung really only take 3 weeks to fully recover from?
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer. Depends how significant the puncture is and where it is. I would say 3 would be minimum. I would think for a punctured lung, particularly these days when, especially off the back of what happened to Christian Petrarca last year, I think clubs are being more conservative with these internal issues. So maybe in the past that they might try and rush players back. I'm not sure whether they would do that. I don't know exactly when St Kilda's bye is, but whether they
round
wait
13. So
round 13. So maybe he just misses the 2 games, the bye, and then comes back. So
can't imagine you'd seen him before then.
No, I wouldn't say that. So maybe a week after the bye. So that's a tough one. 2 weeks. Can you afford to sit him on the bench for 2 weeks? I'm not sure if you can.
So plenty of people, Chloe, in the situation of having 2 or 3 or more of some of these injured guys, which I think includes you. Do we trade all of them, or could you potentially hold one? What would your sort of priorities be in terms of who to get rid of?
Well, that's the question that I was prepared to ask you today, actually. But for me personally, and not really for any great reason, I will be holding Horne-Francis. So I've got Horne-Francis and Macrae, no Callaghan, which is lucky for me. But I'll be holding Horne-Francis mainly because I thought if I look at my finished team, who would I prefer in my finished team if I could only have one of those two? And just based on recent scores, if I just scroll down, I've got some of Macrae's recent scores here. I think, if I can't find the exact numbers, he's gotten, there we go, 77, 160, 79, and then another 77. So if I compare that to Horne-Francis' score and what I think his ceiling is, I think Macrae was so great to start the year and probably still will be to finish the year once he comes back in the side. But I'm willing to take the risk on keeping Horne-Francis in my side and parting ways with Macrae potentially could bring him back. The thing with Horne-Francis, though, obviously scored the 22, so his price will drop and you might be able to bring him back in for cheaper. So that could also be the smart play, but I haven't 100% decided yet. I think that that's what I'll do, but it's definitely a difficult choice to make.
I mean, it's interesting that Horne-Francis is actually about 20 grand cheaper than Macrae. So by trading Macrae, you actually get more for him.
Yeah.
Even though, as you say, I think Horne-Francis is more of a lock to be in that sort of top 6 defenders, forwards, I should say, when he does come back, as opposed to, Macrae's certainly going to be around the mark as well. But given some of those recent scores, maybe, you could probably, he's in a mix with a bunch of other guys like your Chad Warners, and now you've got Petrarca down there as well.
Yeah, I will say as well, the way that my team's set up, I already have Petrarca still sitting, waiting in my midfield for when I get the chance to move him forward, if I do have to move him forward into my finished forward line. So I think, I jumped on Petrarca, I jumped on Warner. I already had Rankin and Horne-Francis from the start. So I think for me personally, if I have to part ways with one of those guys, then it's doable. But if they're kind of the crux of your forward line and you don't have really anyone else around to swing in there, if you're thinking about your finished forward line, maybe just make sure that you're okay for numbers before, trading them both out. And then maybe in a couple of weeks' time, you might be regretting it when everyone else's forward lines are pretty much finished.
Yeah, the DPPs are great, but they do add an extra layer, a bit of complication, because I think I've got Warner at the moment in my midfield. And I was thinking, I've got Sinclair in the back line. Maybe I could move him to the mids over the buys to help cover some holes and things. So, yeah, that's definitely something to factor in. We talked about Shai Bolton. He's $430K this week, which is a great price. Nigel also asking, and, Stephen as well, asking to compare him with Matt Rowell, who's $464K. So that's about 100 grand cheaper than he started. I brought him in, traded Horne-Francis to him, which now I might end up okay, but certainly wasn't the best move at the time. And he just does my head in as a player, whether he's scoring either 130 or about 60, it seems like. For that price, though, you could just about take the risk and just be prepared to sort of ride the roller coaster. But any thoughts on Matty Rowell?
Yeah, I made it 2 weeks ago. I chose I'll put Noah Anderson in my team. Probably more again. I try and looking at the midfield primos, guys that probably won't get tagged. And Rowell's probably been a victim of because of his elite start to the season getting tagged. And I've sort of tried to steer away from those players, the guys that can are going to rack up big numbers without necessarily getting tagged. And that's why I went with Noah Anderson. But yeah, Matt Rowell, because he is so influential, he probably still going to be the target for opposition teams. So you need to be careful.
Yeah, Anderson, 544K. So a few people are looking at midfielders around that sort of low 500s range. He's definitely one to factor in as well. And if I'm not wrong, the Suns have a pretty good run home. He certainly plays Richmond again, which he always scores well against. Question as well, Shai Bolton versus Luke Jackson. So Jackson, I was actually a little bit surprised, I have to say, looking up the forwards during the week, that he's the number 2 averaging forward for the year so far, behind Bailey Smith, averaging 112 points a game. He's been doing a lot of ruck work with Sean Darcy, either out of the side or when he plays, he sort of still hasn't seemed to, be his the full Sean Darcy experience. But how confident can we be that continues?
I think from what we've seen on the weekend, I think Luke Jackson will probably get more opportunity to do more rucking. Now, still an injury concern on Sean Darcy. Even if he's fit, I'm not necessarily sure whether he automatically comes straight back in. And even if he does, I think you'll see the balance of a bit more ruck work from Luke Jackson. But he can still score pretty well, even as a forward, second rucking. So he probably is a safe option. Again, the rucks, he's always going to get the opportunity to score good points, and certainly not going to have an issue getting tagged or anything like that, where maybe the Shai Bolton, as well as he's been going as a midfielder, maybe teams start to just target his influence a little bit more because of what he can do. So he might be set, opposition teams might set an opponent for Shai Bolton a little bit more than they maybe have, where Luke Jackson probably gets a bit more free reign. So if I had the choice of two, it's probably always a safer option to go with the sort of the ruck option, isn't there, with the point scoring and the opportunities.
You're paying 100 grand more for Jackson, but we do.
Oh, it's 100 grand more. Oh, them Shai Bolton. I only say they were similar prices. No.
Whoever asked the question must have a bit of money in the bank. But we do have to mention Shai did have a game against the Saints a few weeks ago where he scored 5. Yeah. He wasn't the sub, didn't get injured. He played an entire game and finished with 5 Supercoach points. So you are taking on that potential risk. But apart from that, he's been really good.
Yeah.
That game against the Saints, though, Luke Jackson also only scored 64. And that was probably, I think that was the one game that Sean Darcy was playing, and he scored a 72. But let's just be honest, anyone who watched that game, it just wasn't the best game.
Yeah, that was an anomaly for everyone.
I think we could probably just scratch them all out for that game. But yeah, that's interesting what you said about avoiding the tag as well for Luke Jackson, because I think that probably is a big point where Bolton could be targeted by opposition teams. I think Nathan O'Driscoll is also a test this week for Fremantle. So I don't know if he could potentially take some of those CBAs away from Bolton. I'm not quite sure what they're looking to do, but he obviously stepped up to fill that Hayden Young centre bounce minutes. So I'm not quite sure if that could be impacted by O'Driscoll at all, but there's definitely a lot going on in terms of Freo selection.
Yeah, and Erasmus played well and actually got a full game, so that might be one to keep an eye on. And the other one too, if I go Fremantle, talk about a rookie if you want to put one in. I think Cooper Simpson is a great value get now because he's shown in the 2 games across half-back that I don't think he's going to get dropped anytime soon. I think you get the good break even with him, and he's got some real upside as the year goes on. So that might be one that you can try and flick it if you need to get a rookie back in there and put some money in the bank.
He's definitely one to try and grab this weekend. It's an interesting question of, if you've got all these injuries, what do you deal with? And I would be inclined to, say you had 3, like you're talking about Chloe, that maybe hang on to a Macrae or a Horne-Francis, even if it's only for 1 week, to get Cooper Simpson in, because I think he's got a break even way into the negatives, and there's not a heap of rookies around at the moment who we can be confident are going to play, and he could be really handy through the buys. When we're talking about a Huswaite and Boxall and guys like this that we just don't know if they're going to play, and when you're trying to get best 18 through the buys, we really rely on guys coming off the bench to help out. So, I wouldn't want to miss him for sure. Yeah,
I wasn't sure exactly who he had come in for to fill their spot off the half-back line for Freo, but watching him play and how effective his kicking was, I don't think there's any way that they could really move him out of that spot personally. But I don't know who he's replacing, but I thought he was great. So,
and I mean the other, with heaps of Freo talk, and Freo and St Kilda have that round 13 bye, so it does make them maybe a little bit more attractive if you don't have too many already, is Caleb Serong. He's around that, probably similar to Luke Jackson, maybe slightly cheaper, but in that group of midfielders in that sort of low 500s range. But he's been okay this year, but how have you seen him? Would you bring him in?
He's still been pretty good. He's had a couple of down games, which he probably didn't have last year. I think he was almost elite in every performance. So he has had the couple of the St Kilda one that every Fremantle player had a poor one, and maybe one other. But I've had him in my team for the start of the year. It's been slightly disappointing. He was one of the premiums. Him and Nick Dacos have probably been the 2 that were almost my first 2 picked in the midfield. I just is expecting high performance every week that have just been slightly disappointing. But if they're in your team, I think you stick with them. But if they're not, I'd be maybe looking around them. There'd be better value options.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, important question. How much thought have you put into planning for the buys?
Not enough yet, but I will have to do that, as I said, with the injuries to some of the players I've got on the side. I will need to put a little bit of thought into which premium I bring in as a replacement for particularly Callaghan and Horne-Francis, who I probably will look to move on. So we'll have to just work around that. I haven't put a lot of thought into it yet.
There's a question here from Jakota saying that for round 12, which I think will be probably one of the trickier bye rounds, where you've got North Melbourne, Port Adelaide, the Bulldogs, and Carlton also on the bye, which is plenty of players. He currently has in his team Sheasel, Dale, Rosie, Richards, Chera, and Tristan Cherry, and saying, how many is too many? How do you sort of work around this, and looking to potentially trade one of those guys out? But I mean, looking at those names, I wouldn't be rushing to drop anybody. I mean, maybe Caleb Daniel he's got as well, but he was good again last week. I mean, I know, Chloe, how's your round 12 looking? Can you help Dakota out?
Yeah, well, my round 12 depends a little bit on what trades I end up sticking with. All of my permutations of trades ended up landing on a Dogs player, either Bont, if I could get him in, Bailey Dale in the back line, because I don't really want to bring someone in. Yes, I think it's important to consider the buys, but if I'm looking long term, I don't want to bring someone in just because they've got good buys, and then I get to the end of the year and I'm like, I don't actually really want this person in my team. But if I just quickly go onto SuperCoach Plus and see who I don't have playing, based on the trades I've currently got at the moment, Sheasel won't be playing, Matt Carroll, if he's named, won't be playing, Bont, Rosie, Cripps, Chera, Cherry, Vistenini, and then, Horne-Francis already wasn't playing anyway. So it's not looking great for me in round 12.
What's your take about the bye? Should you be factoring in who you bring in on the bye? Because every team's going to have a bye, whether it's around 12, 13, just space that, or like Chloe said, you're thinking big picture and you're looking at what your team wants to look like at the end.
Yeah, I think I actually do agree with that you don't want to base all your decisions just around the buys. But if it's sort of a 50-50 and you're weighing up between, say, a Serong and a Josh Dunkley or someone around that similar price, then maybe that is what helps make that final call. I mean, someone else has asked, how many keepers is too many, and they're saying they'll have 6 out in round 13 if they bring Bolton in. I think, so remember, during the bye rounds, it's only your best 18 scores count. With Flex, we now have 23 players on field. to get your sort of 18 from, and you can hopefully bring on some of those bench guys if anyone is playing. So you want to be a bit clear-headed about who you think might actually get a game that week. But I think you can afford to have one or two missing in each line. So if you've got, I've got two St Kilda defenders, Sinclair and Wangan and Miller now. And I think that's okay, but I wouldn't want, a Jordan Clark as well because you've only got two bench guys there who could potentially come on for them. So, I'm looking at round 14 has actually turned out to be a bit of a tricky one for me. Like you say, SuperCoach Plus is so good because you can just look at each of the bye rounds and it's pretty obvious when you look at your team where the holes are. And I would love to bring in Isaac Heaney this week. He's 517K, so he's even a little bit cheaper than your Serong types. But I've already got two or three midfielders missing that week, so it probably is going to make it tough. But then do you just think, do I just cop it for a week and then I've got this guy who I think can average, 110 for the rest of the year. So it's a tricky balancing act, but ideally you probably don't want to overload one of them because this year the buys are spread out a little bit more than they have been. Only the 4 teams missing each week. So hopefully we should be able to get those best 18 scorers on field in each of those bye rounds. But it's probably going to hit us pretty hard in the face in round 12 when the first of the bye round, so you can't even bring anybody in who's anybody you trade out or trade in is going to be having a bye over the next few weeks. Yeah, so it does make it difficult. But when you're looking at different options this week, certainly something to factor in.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if it's a 50-50, then pick the player who has the buy that best suits your team. But if the options that you're choosing between don't align with that, then I would just say go with the player that you really want. But I don't know if that's good advice. That's just what I'm going to do. So.
And in this case, Shai Bolton, he's 430K, so you just might think, well, the value's there, and if I don't get him, who else is there that would, then allow me to make this other trade that I want to make? So, I probably wouldn't pass on someone like him, or certainly Cooper Simpson, just, because of the buys. But maybe if it's those sort of, you're trying to look for a value primo and there's a few options, that's something to factor in. So Sean here is trying to compare three guys in that sort of mid-500 range. Can they be sort of top end primos for the rest of the year? George Hewitt, 587K. Tom Liberatore, 567. Josh Dunkley, 555. And they're all sort of around that 110 average. If you had to pick one...
Yeah. I'm tossing. I want to bring in Tom Liberatore into mine. I think Libba's the one. Just the consistency basis. You know what you're going to get with Libba. Even the Dogs are flying. They're a high possession team. They flick a ball around a lot. He's going to tackle, win a lot of contests and clearance. George Hewitt's been amazing his year. You probably think that's his top end, what we've seen the first 10 or 11 weeks. Yeah. If he can sustain that, great, good on him, but it's more unlikely. And Dunkley can be a little bit hit and miss. I know he's pretty consistent, but sometimes he may not get as much. So I'd be going Libba out of those three. I like Libba a lot.
Chloe, the question that we were debating before we came on here, no one specifically has asked this, but if you could get Libba, but you just happen to have enough money in the bank that you could grab Marcus Bontempelli this week instead, but it would probably clean out all your savings for future trades. Would you do it?
Yeah, well, we've got also a question later about whether you should save some money for future trades. So it's an interesting discussion. At the moment, I've chosen to go with Bont, but I do like Libba as well, and I think then I've been chasing value all year. It's worked out for me so far. If I can save that $100,000, it pretty much is $100,000 between them. Libba's a great option. I don't know. I don't know.
Bont's an interesting one, right? Yeah. Because I think more so this year than the other year, they are going to play Bont depending on what the game needs, and Bont's going to be more about the team. And he may not. He's not just going to be a plug in the midfield all game, every game. He'll spend time forward. I know he's going to be a high scorer regardless because he's that type of player. So we're not saying that, but just whether he has some games that may not be off the Richter scale, especially if they're winning, and there's so many other midfielders. It's just it's an interesting one with the Bont. What level he gets to, because I think he'll play more of a team role at the back end of the season because they're trying to win a flag here.
3/4 time a few weeks ago.
That's right. Yeah.
Still scored amazing.
Do they look to manage him at times if they keep winning and playing more forward? It'd be interesting to see.
Interesting.
I guess the good thing about Bont is he can move forward, whereas Libba kind of mainly plays out of the midfield. But I think that if they're going to be able to score relatively similarly for the year, if you can save the $100,000, you'd probably do it and get Libba, right?
Yeah, I think so. And they got a lot of games.
Maybe I'm leaning towards that. What do you think, Al? Marvel.
I mean, it's hard to knock back Bont, isn't it?
But it's hard. It's very nice sitting in there.
I think they've got a pretty good run home. They've got a lot of games at Marvel Stadium, which will lend themselves to high possession, a lot of ball. So I don't think you go too wrong if you look at some of those Dogs players.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just that extra $100,000, and we talked about it. Looking ahead to even next week, there's not a whole lot of rookies around who've played maybe one game who we think, he'll be the obvious one to pick up next week. So maybe it does make sense to leave that money sitting in the bank, and then you can afford to, Kadeem Coleman, someone that we really like. He'll be, assuming he goes all right again this week, I think he'll be a really popular target next week. And if you've already got that money sitting there, you could maybe go from a rookie straight to him without having to try and force another trade somewhere else. So, yeah, that's certainly something to factor in as well.
I will say we did have a question as well from Nick, whether it is smart to hold 500K plus in the bank. I would say no for me personally for 500K, but if you are able to build about 100K or so, this might be the week to keep it. But, yeah, it is good to have the points on field as well. So
Yeah, I think if you're sort of putting that money away to get we know Butter's price is coming down and you think after their buy round 13 it'll be a great time to grab him. That's another 2 or 3 weeks that you're having the money there and not getting those points on field. So, it's probably not worth it to have that much sitting there. But, yeah, I don't mind the idea of having up to maybe 100.
Not to harp on about it, but my conundrum with the Bont or Libba decision is just whichever one I choose, they will be the player that I will have now for the rest of the year and I probably won't get the other one in. So it's basically just a long-term decision. Which one do I like in my team more?
Yeah, I think we're sitting there thinking, and we were talking about this before, thinking, geez, Libba does look really good. Look at his scores and his price. It all looks great. But, in round 17, 18, you think, I really would have preferred to have Bont in my final team. But as you say, maybe if his role isn't as
if they're the same, if they're scoring the same, then I don't know. It's difficult.
Can get close to him. We're sort of on the same line. Brody asking, is it worth paying up for Lachie Whitfield? So he's come down a little bit, 580K, but probably not going to get much cheaper than that. And he's looking at some value options in a Serong or a Tom Green who's 550K. Can we help Brody out?
I think Lachie Whitfield will be consistent. I think he'll just continue to perform the way he is. So if that's good enough to put him in, I don't think there's not much fluctuations with him. Teams haven't really gone to work on him in regards to stopping his influence this year like they may have in the past. Lachie Ash is going. Is Lachie Ash, what price is he compared to Whitfield? He's going just as well this year if there's a bit more value there. But no, you can't go wrong with Whitfield.
I don't think he's much cheaper now. He was at the start of the year.
Yeah, not anymore.
But what about the two Saints who are a little bit cheaper? So talking about high break-evens before, Wangan and Miller has got quite a high one now. So if you waited a couple of weeks, he will come down. And Sinclair's still only sort of 540, I think, something like that. Like he went up a bit last week, but he's still pretty cheap. But, I'd probably save the 50 grand and get him over Whitfield if you don't have Sinclair.
Yeah, I think so. That would be about right. Yep.
Lachie Ash is 555.
I started with Sinclair. I wasn't concerned about the injury pre-season. I had him in right from the start.
Question from Matthew about, we talked about Cooper Simpson, who we really like, but he's comparing him to another potential cash cow this week, Dante Vistenini. Which Chloe, you jumped on early last week.
Yeah, I jumped on early.
Well done.
Yeah.
He's been okay. He's played well. We were just chatting off there. I think if Port Adelaide continue to struggle and finals sort of become out of reach and they do start thinking a bit more about the future, I see him getting more games. So I don't think, Jordan Sweet certainly didn't set the world on fire. So I would think they'd persist with Vistenini. So I think that's a good one. Yeah.
What, Christian, without notice of just moving off Supercoach slightly, but it's all relevant, of course. What's going on with Port this year?
Well, to be honest, the psyche of having a coach that you know is not going to be there next year, you're probably always going to get this sort of performance, to be fair. It'd be a really weird situation as a player to know that, well, does it really matter? This coach is not going to be here next year. There's a lot of confusion. Clearly, they've felt once they can't win a game, their effort has declined, and that's why they've had their big blowouts. So, the only thing you can consider for Supercoach potentially is if they do decide to move on Ken Hinkley early and give Josh Carr the keys, how much he shakes up the team and what he does with it. More kids, does he start to play some more youngsters and give opportunity? That's maybe something that we can't really factor in, but just something to have in the back of your mind a little bit.
That's true.
Yeah, we've seen that in previous years with mid-season coaching changes, that it does open up
and positional changes as well. That
kind of thing.
No more Rosie off halfback. What are we going to do?
I know. Yeah.
Well, we should just quickly touch on that too. The DPPs come in, the next round of position changes comes in after this round. So, I know some people are asking on the Phantoms Lair about who might get DPP, and you can see all the numbers on if you go to the news tab on the Supercoach app or on Code Sports and heraldsun.com.au, and you can look up any player to see their latest time in position. But Connor Rozee is clearly the standout. We know he's going to become a def mid. And there's a few other interesting ones that may be more draft options, but some of those real big names, I think Will Ashcroft's probably the only one that could get it if he spends a heap of time forward this week. But like Zach Merritt, Bont, they're sort of in the mid-20s, and you need to get 35% forward or, in the second position to get that DPP. So probably it's not going to be, I think there were 70 players got DPP in the first round, but it's not going to be that big this time. But Rozee will be a big one. And again, we're talking about, you're thinking, well, I'm finishing my defence, do I want to bring in a defender and thinking maybe Kitty Coleman next week, maybe Callum Mills will be someone we can think about in a couple of weeks as well. And you've got Rosie, you can go back there. So, yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, I think for that reason, I mean, I'm not necessarily recommending this for other people, but I think I might stick with my 2 on-field rookies for now in my back line, just because I think that I'll need those spots to be able to get some of those value guys in. But, yeah, Rosie's an interesting one because with Horne-Francis out now and then you never know what's going to happen, as you said, down the line. He might just go back to playing a midfield role and then we'll just have him in our back lines, which will be great. But he would have timed it perfectly for this run of DPPs. So thanks for that.
Ken?
Thinking of us, Ken.
Think about quickly to finish off on the defence, Joey. Have you had Zach Reid all year, and the other one that
I traded Zach Reid out after his first couple of weeks, and I thought that. I was never a fan of the key position players anyway, and Reid was, and then after what was his first 2 or 3 games, it was it was hard to keep him. So congratulations to anyone who had the faith in him. I certainly didn't, and traded him out very early, so I regret that one.
I have to admit, I nearly did that too. I think it was the week where he'd been scoring 30s and 40s, and I was thinking, I don't know. Yeah,
a key position player. I thought, no, this is silly. So I traded. I can't remember who I got in for him, but
it was someone good.
Yeah, I know, probably not enough.
And Matt Roberts is the other one. Were you on that train?
No,
as well?
I wasn't on the Matt Roberts train. No, I didn't. No, I wasn't sold on Matt Roberts. So again, missed out.
Yeah, I mean he was good early, but now I'm not so sure and thinking, maybe he could be Callum Mills. Mills is someone I've definitely been keeping an eye on, and we think might come in this week. Maybe be the sub, something like that. I think he got about 20 disposals in a half in the VFL last week in his first game back, but the timings doesn't align brilliantly for the Swans. I think he'd come in, maybe play one, or he'd be on the bubble, and then he'll have one game before their bye. So it's a bit tricky to see how we fit him in, but sort of in, not much above 300K in defence. I think he's, especially with not much cash around, and if we're looking to, spend all that money to get Bontempelli or guys like him or Tristan Cherry, he's someone who could definitely help us out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think at that price, he's probably a must-have. The VFL stats, though, a lot of Carlton's players who were usually playing in their VFL side were playing in the AFL side on the weekend. So I always get a bit, teams are jumping around a bit, so I get a bit dubious about VFL stats. But Callum Mills is Callum Mills, so you'll take him for that price.
Yep, just hope his body holds together.
That's the risk. He's got to stay injury-free when he gets in the side.
Yeah, exactly. Now, very important question to finish off with. David asking a question for me. How do you feel about being in the Phantoms fry pan? So on the Phantoms lair on Monday, of course, at the end of the show, the Phantom throws someone in the fry pan that he wants to give a bake to each week, and it was me because I potted him on Twitter about outscoring him in Supercoach this week. So he's worried about the South Australian Victorian politics. I will say that it was just was meant to be just a little drive-by because the Phantom is well ahead of me in the rankings this year. But I'll give the last word to Simeon Thomas Wilson, who is a member of the Lair, but he replied on Twitter and said he wants it on the record that he is not for Fant Bop, as he's now calling him, using the pan to settle his personal grudges, which for a guy who has hidden his identity for years, he has a lot. So we'll just leave it with that. But a bit of interstate rivalry going on, and that's the Lair guys over in South Australia have been having a pretty good year in Supercoach. But maybe I got a little bit lucky, fair to say, with Horne-Francis on the weekend because trading him out's not been a great move for me. But just trying to figure out how I can make the most of it this week and maybe grab someone that other people can't because they have to deal with all these injury issues. But Joey, any early thoughts on what your trades will be before we sign off?
I want to bring Chad. I think Chad Warner's someone I want to bring in forward. As I said, I was thinking about Paddy Cripps. I think Cripps is unders at the moment. I'm going to be bullish on Carlton. Chatting to you, Chloe, before. Carlton have got a pretty good run coming up. I think we'll see the best of Cripper. I don't write off the champions, basically, is what was sort of a bit of my philosophy. Some guys that have had a little bit down, I think can bounce back, but I'm going to have to put some thought in it. And Shai Bolton's the other one I'm going to try and bring in. So they're sort of where I'm heading. Some guys at good value that I think got some upside.
Yeah, absolutely. Any early thoughts before we sign off, Chloe? Well, you've got Bont
for
at the
me,
moment.
it's really to Bont or not to Bont this
Oh, yeah,
week.
Libba's my other one that I'm tossing up to. Yeah, Libba. Yeah.
And I will say, like the Cripps pick, I actually started him, was a bit disappointed for a while, but he went down and then he's kind of coming back up again. So hoping that'll work out. But for me, Bont or not to Bont, I'm definitely bringing in, I think, Bolton and Simpson. And then it kind of is, do I use my final boost to get a Bont or a Libba in? I was looking at getting a Jordan Clark or a Bailey Dale in my backline, but as I said, I'll just stick with the two rookies there for now, and hopefully the value options can come and save me, as most of my year has been saved by value options so far. So I'll back them in And yeah, I'll choose between Bont or Libba. I'll probably choose on Thursday night, right before lockout.
Yeah. And yeah, both those guys have the tricky round 12 bye. So yeah, keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm sort of looking at, I could get Bont, or yeah, I really like Libba as well. And yeah, I like Heaney, but he's a tricky buy for me. So yeah, a few options to weigh up over the next few days. And of course, we'll have the live show at 6:30 on Thursday as the teams come out. So we already know there's going to be some pretty big outs. So we'll see what else happens. There's always some curveballs.
Yeah, there'll be something thrown up late, won't there? It'll really throw us into
Tom
a spin.
Stewart.
Yeah, Tom Stewart. Who knows? I can't believe I'm sitting with Stewart. Who
It'll
knows?
be cheap anyway. For
Yeah,
those of us who
that's
don't know
right.
him. So join us then. Good luck with your trades this week. Thanks, Joey, for coming on.
Thank you, Al.
We'll
Thanks,
catch up
Chloe.
again, I'm sure, later in the season. Thanks, Chloe. Goodbye from us, and we'll talk soon.